That baby is crying so loud. I heard the unmistakable sound of a lock clicking. My husband had locked me in the storage shed with our 3-month-old daughter. Outside, snow was falling and the cold was biting. Please open the door! I banged on the door and shouted, but there was no response. Soon, I heard the sound of a car starting from the driveway next to the shed. It seemed my husband had left. The shed, located on the north side of our yard, never got any sunlight and had no heating. It was freezing. How could he lock up his own daughter, just 3 months old, in such a place and leave? I felt his cruelty and was terrified. After waiting for a while, my daughter, who had been sick with a cold since yesterday, began to shiver. Her cries grew weaker. I have to save her, no matter what. In my desperation, I searched for a way out. My name is Lisa. I'm a 32-year-old housewife. I met my husband Dennis at work, and we've been married for 3 years. When the younger and handsome Dennis asked me out, I felt like I was dreaming. I lost my parents in a car accident when I was 5 and was raised by my grandparents. They passed away just as I started working, leaving me all alone. Dennis had also lost his parents to illness. Maybe our similar backgrounds brought us closer. We began our life together in the house Dennis inherited from his family. It took a while, but last year I finally got pregnant, and now we have a 3-month-old daughter named Ellie. Our marriage and Ellie's birth should have been the happiest moments of our lives. But I had no idea that this was just the beginning of a nightmare. Dennis was always kind, working hard, and we had happy days. The only concern was his love for video games and the amount of money he spent on them. But he wasn't into gambling or drinking, so I thought it was okay. I believed that once we had a child, he would change. But when I told Dennis I was pregnant, his reaction was unexpected. I'm pregnant. Really? Wow. He looked uncomfortable and finally said, I'm not really good with kids. I was disappointed. I thought he would be happy. But once he sees our child, he'll surely find her adorable. But Dennis didn't. After a difficult labor, when I finally gave birth, I was over the moon with love for our daughter. But Dennis looked at her and muttered, She looks like a monkey. He neither held our baby nor comforted me after the birth. Instead, he seemed more interested in something else. Now that we have a child, we'll need money. So I searched the house and found this. My husband excitedly pulled out a banking card. It was the one that held the insurance money I received when my parents tragically passed away in a car accident. My grandparents had kept it safe for me, and aside from my college tuition, I hadn't touched it. There was about $30,000 on it. I didn't even know about this card until after my grandparents passed away. This money felt like it was in exchange for my parents' lives, so I kept it aside for emergencies. Why did you have this? Why didn't you tell me about this? It's a lot of money. It's from my parents' insurance. It's not something to brag about. With this much, we can splurge a bit. Let's buy a car. I've always wanted a sporty one. Dennis started listing other things he wanted, like gaming consoles, assuming he'd use the money. Wait, I don't want to use the money for that. It's our money, right? As a couple, let me use some. I want to save it for emergencies. We don't know what the future holds. We argued about it, but after a while, it seemed like Dennis understood. Fine, but I'll manage it while you're in the hospital. Give me the PIN. Something told me not to share the PIN with Dennis. No matter how much he insisted, I didn't. He stormed out of the room, sulking like a child. and never came back to visit. When I was discharged, Dennis wasn't there. I had to carry my baby and luggage alone and took a taxi home. But things got worse at home. Every time our daughter cried, which is normal for babies, Dennis would shout, "She's so noisy. She's just a baby. That's why I hate kids. They're expensive and a hassle. Why did we even have her? That's harsh. If you're the mother, make her stop." Dennis wouldn't even hold our daughter. I was alone, without parents or grandparents, and had to care for her by myself. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Late at night, while feeding my daughter, I often held back tears. People change when they know there's money. Dennis started skipping work and became irresponsible. "We have money, right?" became his catchphrase, and he just lounged around playing games. "Why aren't you working? You can't just keep taking days off. You're always home. I just had a baby. If you want me to work, I will when she's older. We have money. Let me use it. It's what my parents and grandparents left for me. It's not shared property." We fought daily about money. Our daughter, sensing the tension, cried constantly. 3 months after she was born, Dennis quit his job. One evening, our daughter, who had been feeling unwell, started crying. My daughter, who had been suffering from a cold and had had a fever since the day before, started to get upset and cry. "She's so loud. She's sick and has a fever. Make her stop." I tried to soothe her, but she cried louder. "That's it." In a fit of rage, Dennis dragged us into a storage shed in the freezing winter. "Stop it!" I heard the lock click. "Open the door. Ellie has a fever." If we stayed in this cold shed, something terrible might happen to Ellie. I banged on the door, pleading, but Dennis wouldn't open it. Then he made a shocking demand. "Give me the PIN for the banking card." "What?" "Tell me and I'll let you out." I can't." "Then stay in there with Ellie forever." The shed was located on the north side of the yard, a place that never saw sunlight and lacked any heating. It was chillingly cold. The thought of locking up a 3-month-old baby in such a place, I felt the cruelty of my husband and became terrified. Right now, my daughter's life is more important than money. Reluctantly, I decided to comply with my husband's demand to get out of the shed. "Okay, I'll tell you the PIN, just open this." "Tell me the PIN first, then I'll open it." I was hesitant, but I decided to trust him. However, as soon as I told him the PIN, I heard him laughing, followed by the sound of a car driving away. Dennis had left. I've been tricked. I felt weak at the knees and crouched down, holding my daughter. Still, a tiny hope remained that he might change his mind and come back. To make matters worse, my daughter, who had been sick and feverish since the day before, began to shiver. I was only wearing a thin outfit, and even wrapping my daughter in a blanket didn't warm us up. The cold was biting, and my teeth started chattering. Despite my efforts to keep warm, the cold only intensified. Ellie's cries grew fainter, and her face turned pale. I can't wait any longer. I need to do something. Looking around, I spotted something. There! In the corner of the shed was an old, tarnished baseball bat. I used it to hit the shed door repeatedly. A small gap appeared, but it wasn't enough to unlock the door. Snow started to seep in through the gap. "Help! Someone, please!" I kept shouting through the gap. "Are you okay? What happened?" After a while, Mrs. Rothery from next door noticed and brought a crowbar from her house. She managed to pry open the door. Mr. Rothery, seeing my shivering daughter, immediately drove us to the hospital. Once there, the nurses took my daughter for tests and treatment. Seeing my worried face, Mr. Rothery comforted me in the waiting room and shared his story. His ex-wife had a controlling husband who would get violent and abusive when things didn't go his way. Even if Dennis didn't hit me, locking us in a freezing shed was life-threatening. Such actions could escalate, and he advised me to be careful. I decided I couldn't stay with such a dangerous man and planned to leave. Mr. Rothery advised me to act quickly. I left my daughter with Mrs. Rothery and went back home. Dennis wasn't home. As I was packing, I noticed my cash card was missing. Then I found some documents sticking out of Dennis's bag. What? He planned this far ahead? I'll never forgive him. Furthermore, when I returned to the hospital and saw the drastic change in my daughter's condition, I decided not to just flee, but to take action against my husband. The next morning, he called. Is the kid behaving now? In a cold voice, I replied to his mocking tone. Our daughter has passed away. What? He seemed shocked. She developed pneumonia because you locked her, already sick with a cold, in that freezing shed. Despite the treatments, she didn't make it. That's a lie, right? It's your fault. I'm reporting this to the police. I could sense his panic over the phone. I didn't mean for that to happen, I swear. His excuses were futile. I don't want to talk to you right now. I'll handle Ellie's funeral. We'll discuss things later. When I confided in Mrs. Rothery about wanting to take action against my husband, she introduced me to a lawyer. We agreed to meet at the lawyer's office. 3 days later, I sat face to face with Dennis at his attorney's office. I'm sorry about Ellie. I never intended for her to die. It's too late for apologies. Plus, you've been quite busy these past days. I began laying out the evidence I had gathered over the past 3 days. You charged $30,000 on games using my cash card, withdrew the $10,000 limit from the bank ATM, and even started the process to buy a $50,000 car. Do you even care about being a father? I can't be with someone as dangerous as you. I want a divorce. If we divorce, I'll be at a loss, right? A loss? Well, if we part ways, you won't get this. I placed the document I found in his bag on the table. It was a life insurance policy with Dennis as the beneficiary. You were after my money and my life. No, I just wanted us to enjoy life together. But secretly taking out life insurance on me and locking me in the shed could be seen as an attempt on my life. What? The lawyer beside me nodded in agreement. He explained to Dennis that locking me in the shed in the cold and unauthorized withdrawals were crimes. Dennis seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, his face turning pale and his body shivering. Lisa, please, don't go to the police. Aren't we a couple? You didn't listen when I begged you to let us out of the shed. I'm sorry. I truly regret it. I want a divorce. I'll also be claiming the money you spent from my bank card, compensation from the divorce, and child support in a lump sum. His eyes widened. Child support? Why? Because it's needed to raise Ellie. But she's gone, right? Ellie barely survived. What? Why did you lie? My daughter was in critical condition, connected to numerous tubes. Seeing her like that broke my heart, but she miraculously pulled through. I had hoped that by lying about her death, he might show some remorse, but it only revealed his true colors. I quit my job, I can't pay that much, please! He started crying and begging. You could do something like that to protect yourself. I wanted you to protect me and my daughter too. I won't let you. Don't say that, please help me. But I pushed him away and left everything to the lawyer. We divorced, and I reported him to the police. Dennis ended up in prison. After his release, he sold his family home to pay me the $40,000 he spent, plus compensation and child support totaling $170,000. Apparently, he borrowed the rest from shady sources and is now forced into hard labor. I bought a secondhand house in the suburbs for my daughter and me, and found a job. We live happily in a community where neighbors care for us, and my daughter is growing up healthy and strong.